Here to the special meeting of council for Tuesday, June 25th at 7 o'clock. Council, we have an agenda that's been circulated. Are there any errors or omissions from the agenda as presented? Hearing none, will someone move the adoption? Moved by Councillor Hanson, second by Councillor Ma. Prepared to call the question. All in favor? Contrary minded, motion is carried. We're set up this evening to discuss one item, which is the annual report for the District of North Vancouver. Now, this is laid out in provincial law in the community charter that municipality will produce an annual report, and it identifies many of the topics that we're going to have to address in our annual report, but it also talks about the nature of public input in the process. So tonight's night is for the public to provide their feedback on our annual report. And so if you actually read through the way the community charter presents it, we're to do our best to answer questions if they come up in the process as well. And so we do have some representatives from different departments, either virtual or here in person, and we'll do our best to answer questions as they arise from public presentations. If they require a little bit more research, we'll do our best to get those answers back to you in a speedy, timely fashion before the item is fully adopted. We will do our best to respond to questions and answers as they arise. For council members, if there are clarifying questions that come up along the way, we'll also do our best to respond to that. But I would recommend that arguments for or against the annual report, that's not for tonight. That's for when council has an opportunity for deliberations on the matter. And so at this point, I'm going to go to opening comments. We have Sarah Walker here joining us, who's going to be making some opening comments on the report.
That's right. Good evening, Your Worship, Council, and members of the public joining us tonight. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to the report in front of you this evening. Since the annual reporting process only occurs once a year, I'll be making a presentation to orient council and members of the public on the purpose of the meeting and the report. Joining me this evening is also Maria Lazo, policy analyst from Corporate Services, who's been quite instrumental in pulling the report together. My presentation this evening will be approximately 15 minutes long. The community charter under section 98 requires that each year prior to June 30th, council prepare an annual report and make the report available for public inspection. I can confirm that all statutory requirements have been met. There are specific community charter requirements for the annual report. These requirements provide guidelines about the process and the content of the report. Prior to June 30th, we must A, prepare an annual report for the previous year, B, make the report available for public inspection, and C, hold this annual meeting so council can receive and consider public input. The annual report must include 5 specific elements: the audited annual financial statements for the previous year referenced in section 167.4 of the community charter. For each tax exemption provided by a council under Division 7, Permissive Tax Exemptions of Part 7, Municipal Revenue, the amount of property taxes that would have been imposed on the property in the previous year if it was not exempt for that year. A report with respect to municipal services and operations for the previous year. A statement of how the municipality measured up to the objectives and measures established for the previous year, and a statement of future municipal objectives for the current and following year. And if there were any declarations of disqualifications. There were no declarations of disqualification to report. With respect to statutory notice, in terms of meeting our requirements, the charter says the report must be available for at least 2 consecutive weeks. The report was available as of June 10th. Ads were placed in the North Shore News for 2 consecutive weeks, June 12th and June 19th. And the meeting notice, advertisements, and dnv.org all provided direction on how the public could participate and provide input to the meeting held tonight. We also use social media and our website to draw attention to the report. The report is available online in a printable PDF format, and hard copies are also available for pickup at Municipal Hall and at district libraries. All of the requirements have been met. Audited financial statements, report on previous objectives, permissive tax exemptions, 2024-2025 objectives, and measures, as well as a report on services and operations. Of note, for over a decade, we have taken an approach that is consistent by using the corporate plan as a reference to monitor how we've done on set objectives and to look forward. Council identified strategic priorities for the new corporate plan from 2023 to 2026, which are reflected in the annual report. The community charter also allows for council to provide additional information, and in keeping with best practices, we also have the mayor, the CAO, and CFO provide a high-level summary of the year in review from their perspective. This includes explanatory introductions regarding financial statements provided by finance staff, along with supplemental information in a manner that is easier for the public to understand, and activity and performance measures to illustrate the breadth of municipal services and operations. Public submissions were encouraged in several formats, including the ability to engage with us directly on the annual report webpage, through Twitter, Facebook, and via email. As of this afternoon, we've had one email request for information, and we have had some public input. So again, just one comment. And all of the submissions will be responded to in a summary report that will be published on our website in July. This is typically of interest. So as of 3 p.m. today, we've received the following. We've received 114 unique views to the webpage, and we've also received about 90 downloads of the annual report. So that's typically of interest to council. I won't speak to the financial information. Mr. Daniluk is available to comment, but this is some of the information that is required in the annual report. So the 2023 annual report provides a summary of progress achieved in 2023, measured against the goals and priorities of the corporate plan. The corporate plan informs departmental and divisional work plans, which enable us to deliver day-to-day operations, programs, and services to meet the needs of the community. New KPIs were identified to ensure both alignment and progress reporting on council priorities. Our new KPIs allow us to report out on relevant data collected in the post-pandemic environment, replacing data collected prior, which no longer captures the realities and challenges facing the municipality today. These realities include resource allocation, rising costs, inflation, and capacity challenges. We've also provided enhanced storytelling and visually appealing graphics, resulting in a much more readable and concise report. And for the third year in a row, we've prepared a high-level executive summary of the annual report. I would like to at this time acknowledge staff from across the municipality who have provided data and worked together to produce this annual report. In October 2023, Council approved the 2023-2026 corporate plan and established the following 6 corporate goals. We have made important progress on each of these goals and look forward to continued stabilization in the post-pandemic environment. The following slides demonstrate some of the highlights for each of these areas. Under the goal of enhancing transportation and mobility, we've seen an increase to the pedestrian and cycling network and an uptake in mode share. Additionally, we advanced the design for Mount Seymour Parkway active transportation safety improvements, completed construction of the Livable Deep Cove project, completed the Pemberton Sidewalk project and the Naughton Detour walking path, completed pedestrian crossing improvements, and progressed design work for key cycling routes in Lynn Valley and Lynn Creek town centers and along Main Street, Marine Drive, and Mount Seymour Parkway. With respect to addressing the housing crisis and the community's housing needs, Council approved a rezoning of over 100 housing units on district land on the Lillooet Road and Old Lillooet Road. Council endorsed the North Shore Poverty Reduction Strategy, and the district launched a development approvals process review of the full spectrum of permit and planning related requests. And finally, increased housing options by changing the secondary suite and coach house program. With respect to achieving a balanced and fair economy, we've updated asset replacement costs and the estimated infrastructure deficit following a 3-year period of high inflation and elevated construction costs. We've established a corporate risk management office to improve oversight of strategic and operational risks. And we began work on an economic development strategy focused on growing the number of businesses and increasing the number of employees working in the community. We continue to lead in climate emergency action and environmental management, and Council recently approved the Climate Ready Municipal Buildings Policy to strengthen the community's resilience to climate change. We aligned the district's incentive-based low-carbon approach with the new provincial zero carbon step code regulation, secured funding for shoreline restoration work at Weyahwitchin Kates Park in partnership with the Tsleil-Waututh Nation, initiated the Forest Resilience Implementation Program to identify priority sites for hazard tree management, wildfire risk mitigation, and forest health restoration. With respect to community well-being, culture, and safety, we completed construction of the new ATF at Argyle School in partnership with the North Vancouver School District. We developed the 2023 to 26 accessibility plan, introduced an anti-discrimination, anti-racism policy, and delivered equity, diversity, and inclusion training to all district staff, and responded to and extinguished 2 wildfires, one on Mount Seymour and one in Lynn Canyon, during one of the most challenging wildfire seasons in recent history. Additionally, the district is committed to advancing reconciliation at the local level, and we continue to make progress on strengthening relationships with the Tsleil-Waututh and Squamish Nation. Lastly, with respect to fostering a resilient organization, we developed and launched the 2023-2026 corporate plan, successfully ratified new collective agreements with union partners to achieve competitive working conditions, wages, and benefits, began implementing Microsoft SharePoint across the organization for records and document management, and once again, we were selected as one of BC's top employers for the 6th consecutive time. As we look forward, we expect to advance the priorities established by Council in the 2023 to 2026 corporate plan while balancing emergent community issues, initiatives led by senior levels of government, and any new priorities identified by Council. Of note are the new provincial and federal initiatives such as the National Housing Strategy, BC Homes for People Action Plan, the Accessible British Columbia Act, and the Provincial Emergency and Disaster Management Act, to name a few. This concludes my presentation for the evening. In terms of the annual reporting process, what remains tonight is an opportunity for public input at the required annual general meeting held this evening. Typically, what we've done in the past is the public has the opportunity to speak tonight, and staff are happy to follow up and respond to any questions from Council and the public by email. Thank you for the opportunity to provide the presentation. It is now Council's opportunity to consider the 2023 annual report and any public input, and staff can follow up at Council's direction on any points raised this evening.
Thank you very much, Syra Walker, General Manager for Corporate Services. So I do have a bit of a script to read out just before we go into the public input portion of this evening's meeting. This special meeting of Council is being held to receive public submissions and questions on the 2023 annual report. It's being held in a hybrid meeting format, meaning there's a combination of in-person and electronic participation by some or all members of Council, staff, and the public. Section 99 of the Community Charter requires Council to consider the annual report prepared under Section 98 of the Community Charter and receive submissions and questions from the public. The annual report must be considered at a Council meeting or other public meeting, which brings us to this evening. There is no statutorily prescribed process, as with other consultation, such as public hearings, so the nature and extent of the public input opportunity is up to Council. Accordingly, Council has established the following rules for this public input opportunity. We will first go through the established speakers list. At the end of the speakers list, the chair may call for any other speakers not on the speakers list. You will have 5 minutes to address Council. Begin your remarks to Council by stating your name. After everyone who wishes to speak has spoken, there will be an opportunity for speakers to have one additional 5-minute opportunity. Any additional speaking opportunities will only be allowed at the discretion of the chair and if time permits. If permitted, do not repeat information from your previous presentations and ensure your comments remain focused on the 2023 annual report. If you've provided a submission earlier in the process, there's no need to read it here, as it will have already been seen by staff and summarized for the Council. All members of the audience are asked to be respectful of one another as diverse opinions are expressed. Council wishes to hear everyone's views in an open and impartial forum. Some important notes about this evening's meeting. Council is here to listen to the public, not to debate the content of the 2023 annual report. Council may ask clarifying questions of speakers. Everyone wishing to speak will be provided an opportunity. If necessary, we will continue the meeting on a second night. Finally, please note that the meeting is being held via Zoom and is being recorded in accordance with the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. I will also just say that once the public input portion of this evening's meeting is concluded, then the council will have their deliberation on receipt of the motion at that time. So right now, I have only one person that has signed up in advance of the meeting to speak. So I have a speaker's list of one. So I will welcome up Corey Cost up to the desk here. And if any of the virtual participants would like to add their name to the list, just raise your virtual hand. And I don't see any call-ins at this point. So we should be able to proceed that way. And once we've exhausted the list, then we'll go to the rest of the room and to the virtual participants and see if anyone else would like to add their comments at the time. But for now, welcome Corey Cost. You have 5 minutes to address this meeting.
I do want to say that this will be the first time ever that I protest the nature of running this meeting. It has always been my understanding that as long as the speaker has something interesting to say, relevant to the annual report, there are no time limits. And in the past, I've given much longer input than the cutoff sort of 10 minutes. I just want you to note that, that I feel that would be truly unfair considering the amount of work I put on this particular project. I will note that I have over the years accumulated all of the annual reports, and I bring the last few because they are the most relevant. They deal with the elephant in the room, the sewage plant, and the history of that sewage plant throughout the years, and how it comes to today, where with only one exception, every one of these reports talks about the sewage plant, except this one, the 2023. And I found that rather odd. There's some reference possibly to the corporate plan, but there's no mention in the corporate plan of this particular project. As for the change in the statutes, I've been happy to have donated to me these 3 volumes, the Local Government Act under the Community Charter, the Local Government Act in British Columbia, and the Community Charter itself. And that was donated by the editor of these volumes to me. But I fear that these extremely valuable documents are now worthless to me because of the changes that the province has imposed on our community. And I object strenuously that such changes have taken place because it intrudes on the average citizen to shape their community the way that they feel is best for the community. And that power is taken away from us.
Dr. Cost, may I get you to direct the microphone right towards you there? We're having a little trouble picking
Okay.
up. Thank you so much.
I will try. Speak up as well. That will help, I'm sure. Anyway, this tells you where I'm coming from, but I will not hold back any punches, which I feel are well deserved. I have already sent council my presentation, and I'll leave one of them in the traditional basket, the hard copy. And I would like to have the USB stick show what it shows when I left the test this morning, or this afternoon. So is there a way the clerk can connect to?
Thank you, through your worship. If you could actually exit out, your document should still be on the computer. You'll just need to bring it up and then I will display it into the room.
Okay. Let's see what it brings up. This is the previous presentation.
Yep, so if you close that,
Okay.
yours should be minimized under the PDF that's open at the bottom. So
Okay.
yes.
Oh, I'll just close it off.
Corey, right there.
that will be your presentation there.
Okay.
Oh, no, not that one.
This one.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so we start with the, I think now we're going beyond that. So some general comments I'd like to make. Despite the rhetoric to the contrary, democracy at the BC local government level, as was established back in 1959. I think I give a reference to that. It was quite interesting how local governments came about. But that democracy continues to be eroded, in my opinion. And as evidence to this, I want you to note that A, there's a lack of appropriate consultation by the province on Bill 44, 45, and 47. And sadly, these November 2023 bills were not even mentioned in the 2023 annual report. Forcing reviews of the OCP to be what BC demands it be and not what the residents desire is to me unacceptable. The District of North Vancouver will have to zone single-family lots in line with guidelines set out by the province in their policy manual. The apparent lack of consultation with the community on issues like changing the speed limits from 60 kilometers per hour to 50 kilometers an hour is yet another piece of evidence that our democracy is not working right. If we can't have 4 lanes of traffic in each direction, somewhat above the speed limit of our average street at 50 kilometers an hour, then I see our other streets will need to be reduced to 30. The constant reduction of the time allotted, and I spoke to this earlier, for individual input to public hearings, the 5 and 5 rule, to me, injures the whole public process. People should have the ability to completely present their presentation. So I've gone the first 5 minutes and I will yield the floor.
Corey, I don't see anyone else raising their hand to speak or adding their name to the list, so I'm
Okay.
inclined to go right on to your next 5-minute presentation if you're ready.
Okay, thank you. So the lack of transparencies of the large increase in the cost of the new Lionsgate sewage plant. We are on the hook for somewhere between around $1 billion of the $4 billion with the federal and provincial contributions designed for the $700 million plant. About 200 million from the feds, 200 million from the province, roughly leaves us initially with only 300 million. And that difference, when multiplied, becomes about a factor of 10. Currently, this leaves each home with an increase in sewage charges of about $590 per year for next 30 years, which comes out to around $17,000 that citizens have to come up with sooner or later. Now, assuming our reserve funds and or capital on page 50 of the annual report, our kitty, as it were, is $1,671, which will last about 3 years before it's eaten up. All annual reports prior to 2022 mention that the district's rate stabilization policy will mitigate the projected cost increases. Apparently now they will not. Maybe that's why it wasn't talked about at all in the 2023, the current annual report. It remains to be determined if this 30-year debt load can legally be imposed upon the District of North Vancouver. My thoughts on that are that we have a debt load that we are provincially limited to, but somehow through the back door, there are jurisdictions imposing a debt that we cannot impose on ourselves. And that's, to me, completely unfair. Some references are made below, and I'll let you digest them. And I'll go on to a little more rapid pace. The two elephants in the room. The two elephants in the room are the BC bills 44, 46, and 47, and the extremely high cost of the new sewage plant. The city of North Vancouver, I note that at the regional level, it has recently revealed that Metro Vancouver's North Shore wastewater treatment plant project would be much more expensive to complete than previous estimates. So there's definitely some awareness made by the city of North Vancouver and similarly by the District of West Vancouver that this is an unusual event that came about fairly recently, but was really not noted in our annual report. In an extract on 2.0, I want you to note the 2.2 section. This came from West Vancouver, taken from their annual report. They note the statutes, unlike we do, as being a significant thing. I just want to provide Council how things look to an average home owner in the district. I've lived in this home for approximately 50 years, and my home is assessed roughly around the average for all that time that I've lived here. And I want to explain what I'm saying here. Basically, there's inflation, and if you discount that, how much more did the sewage price go up? It's somewhere between, because it's kind of fuzzy to look at the cost of living over that span. So I've given myself the two cost of living benchmarks, 5.9 or 5.5 since 1975.
Corey, I'm just going to move on to your last 5-minute presentation at this point.
Okay.
Thank you.
So you'll see that the sewage charges are somewhere between 4.8 and 5.1 higher than expected by simply taking account of inflation from 1975, and similarly for all the other fees. Notably, a good deal for me as a homeowner, which originally was taxed at a value of around under $50,000 and now is well over 2.2 million. That factor is 7.8 to 8.4, matched only by, I guess, the utility fees. There's some explanation here of what all these things mean. But this is the annual sewer drainage charges, $200 in 2000 and $930, $40, an increase not of 65% that you expect, but an increase of 470% since the year 2000. So in my humble opinion, there is a need to examine whether the new debt imposed on the district by Metro would eventually exceed our debt limit. And for this, I urge council to read the borrowing liability, which is attached to my input, and I won't bother you with the details, but it's also worth reading the financial report of Metro Vancouver itself on this issue. This is the terms there, and this is the review of each of these volumes from 2023 of the reports about the North Shore wastewater treatment plant. And I've extracted the relevant information, and every year, which they say roughly, we are continuing to monitor the Metro Vancouver processes for determining funding of the Lionsgate wastewater treatment plant that's coming. And that went on from roughly 2015 on to the last year that was mentioned. That was the 2022 annual report, in which while expenses are projected to increase considerably over the next 5 years due to regional and external pressures, including the impacts from the North Shore wastewater treatment plant project, the district's rate stabilization policy will mitigate these impacts. They do not and will not mitigate them any longer. You just don't have enough money. I do suggest that you look carefully and strategically at the amount of money that you still have in your slush or savings account, and maybe those will assist you in maybe making a down payment. It's always a good idea to do down payments when you're in debt. And the interest rates are high. I do have a real question on page 60 of the annual report. Surrey happens to have the lowest residential tax per capita. And it would be nice if some explanation came with that. Is it because the number of people that they have in a dwelling are higher than ours? That would maybe be an explanation. Or maybe just the taxes are lower. I just don't know. And on page 50, oops, as well, I note that the utility sanitary state of our sewer lines is one of the best of anything, above the state of our parks, and certainly above our utility water supply. At 56% being in very good shape, it shows that we've done well on the sanitary utility part, which do not have much inflow. And thankfully, we will not have to pay those extra inflow charges that other members of the North Shore will have to pay. Anyway, I think that briefly outlines my presentation. I want to thank staff, particularly Rick Danlock, for providing me with the information I requested. And I wish you good luck on dealing with this issue of the plant. But you have my backing for what little it matters.
Well, before you go away, Corey, I just want to say you definitely do a lot of research and background work for this presentation, and appreciate the email that you sent out today with the additional information. I did hear two questions in there. One that I don't know that we can address on the spot, which is simply just why are Surrey's taxes lower? I would probably venture that their large industrial tax base and the fact that they're still selling land would affect that bottom line fairly directly. But on the other question, which is why doesn't the report mention the wastewater treatment plant? I don't know if we can specifically address that reporting on Metro Vancouver functions, and maybe I'll have a follow-up, but Ms. Walker, do you have a comment on that aspect? Mr. Stewart?
Your worship, we've quite frankly struggled to get transparency out of Metro as to what these costs are going to be. This is a 2023 report, and much of the breaking news that we've received has happened in 2024. So we'll certainly have an opportunity to respond further once we sort this out in the 2024 annual report.
Thank you.
I will say that the council was not aware of the budget adjustment until I think it's probably not until October of 2023 for the proposed budget adjustment. But that budget adjustment has only just now taken effect. It was passed on May 30th. And so it was not officially the budget of the project, and therefore the allotment wasn't officially the allotment until just this last month. And so, but I do take your point. It's a massive project with a massive impact on our residents, and we should make sure that we're reporting on that in future annual reports. Mr. Stewart, do you have additional comments?
Just to add to that, the estimates that we were getting in 2023, the unofficial estimates, were going from 700 million to 1 million and change. The boost to 3.8 million is a relatively new undertaking, and we're all being caught surprised by that. And we're certainly working very, very diligently to get a better understanding of how that's come about. And believe me, we'll work very diligently to get that information and share it with the public when we get it.
If you have my indulgence, two other things that bother me when reading these reports, and that is, there seems to be no survey of how we are doing in creating jobs on the North Shore. Something that we desperately need to reduce the amount of transport coming across the bridges. So if there's any other information available as to how well or how poorly we are doing in this matter, it would be much appreciated. The other aspect is often safety is brought up as a measure for doing something, whether it's installing new lights or bike lanes or whatever. But safety is a very nebulous thing, and I'm a numbers guy, and I would like to know if when they quote there's 3 accidents per year or so many fatalities per year, how does that fit in with our president's expectations, and how well does it fit in with other municipalities like us? Without that, I think we can't justify these expenses and can put our money somewhere else rather than an emotional aspect.
Thank you. Well said, Mr. Stewart.
Your worship, our Economic Development Office has done some work on job creation, so we can provide that information to.
It is a separate report, but there, it is part of the public record as well. So
In 2024, so.
thank you very much.
Thanks again for the
Thank you.
input.
Okay, would anybody else like to make representation to the annual report? Yes. Mr. Miller, come on up. Welcome. When you're ready, you have 5 minutes to
Good
address
evening.
the council.
Good evening, John Miller from the 1600 block of Tatlow Avenue. Well, the 2023 annual report contains pretty pictures, financial numbers, and positive statements. I feel there are details missing from the report that would put the district's stated position more in tune with reality. The report should contain a page or two that addresses not only what work was done throughout the year, but also what work was not accomplished and the reasons why it wasn't done or whether it was canceled or deferred. In early 2023, the district had capital work carried over from 2022 equal to 1 full year of the annual capital budget amount. I would have liked to have seen the 2023 report indicate by percentage or dollars how much work performed in 2023 was from the 2022 budget, the 2021 budget, and the 2020 budget if applicable. Also, it should have indicated how much percentage-wise performed in the 2023 capital budget and how much was being carried forward into 2024. Earlier this year, staff reported that a quarter of the carryover had been addressed last year. No council member questioned that statement, but I wondered what was meant by addressed. Does this mean that a quarter of the 2023 full year carried over was actually done, i.e. the work performed? Since capital work like the Norgate sidewalk project was deferred, did it form part of the quarter that was addressed? What other work was canceled or deferred? District Council, in my opinion, was wrong when they voted to stick the district taxpayers with a 7% increase in taxes this year. You were fully aware that the full amount of the budgeted capital work for 2024 could not and would not be performed in 2024 due to the 3/4 of a year carryover from 2023, and it could be more than 3/4 if there were deferrals. The 2023 report does contain hints like funds committed to capital projects in progress are relatively high, but an explanation of what relatively high means would have been appreciated. Statements like efforts are being made to catch up on delayed work being impacted by shifting priorities, resource constraints, and ongoing challenges provide a hint of the carryover, but also appear to cover it up because it doesn't say what you're catching up on. With reference to shifting priorities and ongoing economic challenges, who is managing this very large carryover and budgeted work for the year? Why is safety not a priority? For example, we were all aware that the Handsworth School was being replaced with a new building at the same site. The parking lot and access for the new building is now from Handsworth Road and not from Edgewood Road. The district budgeted and approved the funds to install the pedestrian activated lights at the intersection of Capilano Road and Handsworth Road. This was a safety issue and should have coincided with the move to the new building. However, the new building opened up and was occupied by the students in February 2022, but the pedestrian lights were installed in October 2023. This clearly demonstrates that the district no longer considered it a safety issue by having the pedestrian lights installed 18 to 20 months after the move to the new building. We keep hearing from staff that the jobs are coming up higher than originally estimated due to work on the North Shore being more expensive, lack of capacity in the marketplace, inflation, etc. If you delay a project for up to 18 to 20 months, you should expect a cost increase, but don't blame the marketplace, etc. when you don't manage your own work appropriately. I have one question. It actually was part of the presentation at the beginning of the meeting. There's a statement on the 2024-2025 looking ahead. We also expect to advance priorities that may have been placed on hold in 2023 due to resource allocation, rising costs, and capacity challenges. What does may have been placed on hold in 2023 mean? We're in June of 2024. Does staff not know what they did last year? Why is it May? Was it put on hold or wasn't it?
Okay.
And at the same time, you're advancing priorities. What about the rest of the work? Is that being ignored? It's an odd statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Mr. Stewart, did you have additional comments on that?
Yeah, there's a lot of rhetorical comments, quite frankly, with respect to Mr. Miller's comments. The fact of the matter is we have a limited budget, and when increases we face with respect to capital, and capital is very different than operating, and Mr. Miller should know that. And so we manage capital differently than we do operating. And if the costs are too high, then we make decisions as to what we're going to defer or not defer. And that's a prudent thing to do. And we do that every year. We set out a 5-year budget, and we actually manage that in a very prudent way. And in some cases, we either can't deliver that project or it's too expensive to deliver it, and we make a decision as to what we're going to include in the budget based on the available money that we have. We don't just spend money just because a project is going to be 40% more. We just don't go out and spend it. What we do is we allocate, we prioritize, and we do that on an ongoing basis.
I think it's fair to point out, though, that as it is a reflective document on the year past, that we could have more certain language as to what was completed, what was not completed, and what's going to be carried forward, or the tail moving forward. It's not, having less specific language probably just isn't needed. We should be able to definitively say whether it was done or not in the language that we use. That's fair.
And your worship, we have made some real significant inroads this year, matching councillors' priorities with action taken and progress made, and we'll continue to work on that.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Danlick, I think there was a question in there about how much is carried forward from 22 to 23 to 24. Do you have comments generally on the tail? And you don't have to answer on the spot for all of this, but we will try to follow up with Mr. Miller if you can't, with what you aren't comfortable with right now.
Generally, the annual capital plan is in the range of about $80 to $100 million. And over the past few years, it has reduced each year. It was close to a 1-year rollover, and it's been reduced each year in the last 3 years. I believe the carryover last year was in the range of $60 million. And the engineering team has plans to continue to reduce it to a lower level each year.
We're catching up with the backlog of work, but it's still significant.
There's always some lag expected, and it's being reduced, and we have an idea about what an appropriate amount would be, and it's still improvements to be made there.
Okay. We'll try to get some additional follow-up information for you about what was carried over specifically from year to year, but we do make that as a part of our capital planning process in the fall. The tail that gets produced of uncompleted work is actually a big feature in that discussion that we have when we have the capital discussion, which is typically around October or November. Mr. Stewart?
Yeah, Your Worship, I just want to make it clear. We can have a tail, but it means it's just carried over into the next year. It doesn't mean that work hasn't been done. It just means that it hasn't been completed.
Yep.
So I want to make that a real differentiation there.
No, I think that just the point was being made that the report says that it was addressed, which some clearer direction as to whether which portions were completed, which portions were carried forward, and which portions may have been canceled as projects potentially as well. But we do use that language when we have the discussion in the fall for the capital plan. We try to make sure that that's very clear about what's still remaining to be completed at that time. Okay, I see no further speakers. Would anybody else from the public like to make a representation to the special meeting this evening? Okay, hearing none, seeing none no virtual hands online as well. At this point, I'm going to declare that the public input portion is complete. As we move back into the council deliberations, I'm going to put the motion on the floor. I'll be moving receipt of the annual report, seconded by Councillor Hanson. My own comments on this, I mean, much of what's been said tonight, it is a backcasting wrap up of the work that had been completed in 2023. And it's, I actually, when I go through it, I because of, perhaps I have a bit of a different perspective in the role that I play, it does represent the goals and objectives identified by the council. The priorities have been set by the council. The priorities are advancing in those terms. Obviously, there are externalities as things get imposed on us by changes in provincial regulation or federal regulation as it comes to next gen 911 implementation, body cameras, our police contract going to a union contract. We have externalities that come at us from other organizations and other levels of government that affect us and reprioritize some of the things on our lists. Obviously, when we talk about like a transportation project, when TransLink comes along and says that they're going to partially fund a project, that project may move in priority in the work that we choose to focus on and get done. But generally speaking, the annual report reflects that we set our priorities and we have been working towards those priorities for public benefit in our community. So I will be moving receipt of the plan. Seconder is Councillor Hanson.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for your comments, Mayor Little. Thank you to staff for the report. I read it all with care, and it obviously was a very comprehensive document that required a lot of time and effort and skill to prepare. So I thank you for that. Thank you to our presenters, Dr. Cost and Mr. Miller. Very much appreciate the time that both of you took to prepare your remarks, and Dr. Cost, very fascinating presentations with respect to finance. I'm going to propose one, given that we have our Chief Financial Officer with us, very talented Rick Dunlett. I'm just going to pose one general question that came to mind, and it has to do with, as I read the report, it has to do with interest rates. And there's discussion in the report at page 31 and then earlier at page 29 about the rising interest rates and the impact that those rising interest rates have both on our deposits and our long-term debt. The question that I would pose is, what's our projection? I appreciate it's hard to project economies, but what's our projection with respect to interest rates? And does this apparent higher for longer interest rate environment that we're in, does this pose a risk to our finances in the district? What does this mean for us as a body that does have significant debts and significant deposits? Thank you.
Through your worship to Councillor Hanson, currently in the near term, we're projecting impacts in our investment income, elevated investment income, and we're using that investment income to offset rising construction costs. So in the near term, that's how we're managing it. In the longer term, when we're looking at debt, we do have a debt issue coming beyond the one that we've already approved for this fall, and we're looking at interest rates to start to come back down. They've already come down a little bit in the recent announcement, and we expect that to continue. So when we issue the next debt in the spring of next year, we anticipate those rates to be lower and the trend to continue. So longer term, things are projected to stabilize. In the short term, we've been managing the increased revenue and matching that to increase costs as best we can.
Thank you. Yeah, I see no further speakers at this time. Looking for virtual hands or in person here.
I'm trying to find my hand.
Councillor Murray, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Little. Thank you, staff, for the report. A couple of things. I would maybe request, when I opened it, I was thumbing through the KPMG forever. I was wondering if that was the only part of the report we were going to get until I got to the end. So maybe we can, I think in the past we've snuck the KPMG stuff in the back. I think our stuff should be up front. I guess I was a little curious why the sewage treatment plant issue wasn't mentioned. It is the most significant financial impact that we've had, I think, in our history. Certainly in the time I've been here. So I understand those numbers, weren't firm, but they are. And I'm not sure when the mayor and the CAO and the CFO put in their preambles to the report, but I do think, when you're as a resident reading this information, I think you need to kind of touch on the current state of where we are. Again, the housing legislation was not mentioned at all. And even though there was, Mr. Stewart explained that, things that were happening in 2024 that didn't happen in 2023, I get that. But throughout the report, there are things that were referred to that happened in 2024, adoption of bylaws, for instance, I think on the East Keith Road project, which wasn't picked up in the housing section goal 2. On page 57, it says building permits issued in 2023, market ownership units. We issued 3 building permits.
Is that a question to Mr. Milburn?
Well, to someone, I didn't understand it. Like, it says building permits issued, underneath it says planning applications.
Mr. Milburn, do you have a response on the spot?
I can share the information from Pace Development and our recent update report. In every particular time period, there's quite a variable rate based on the development activity of developers in any particular year, and it can fluctuate by hundreds of units in any particular year. I believe there was a reduced number, and I'm looking at the individual permits.
Could you just speak up just a little bit, please?
Pardon me.
Mr. Milburn?
I'll
Yeah.
orient that to myself. In terms of building permits in process in 2023, and I'm just referring to the Pace Development report published previously. There were a couple.
Not my question. Sorry, Mayor Little. Not my question.
Okay.
My question is on page 57 of the annual report. It says building permits issued. Market ownership units in 2022, there were 3.
Yep.
So I'm not, you know what? I'm just gonna, I'll just make my questions, because my understanding, the process is going to be that we're going to ask these questions, then somebody's gonna email us the answers.
Okay.
Yes, we can give you additional information, but I think the ones that fit on that report were only from the very tail end of 2022. Is that correct?
Yes, and it's also specific to certain types of permits. There are also non-residential building permits that are much higher in.
Okay.
We can follow up with additional information.
Thank you, Mayor Little. I guess my point is that it's not really clear, and we're giving, this is the annual report for residents to take a look at, to see where we've come from, where we're going. It is not clear, it's confusing. I would say on the transportation side of it, the mode share, what was the mode share in 2022 when we're providing building permits for 2022? We don't look at the mode share for 2022, so it's not consistent. Library posted, and I assume each of the departments is submitting this information to corporate, but the library did show 2019, 2023, 2030 targets. And then their visits, their program attendance, and their circulation also had a comparison between 2022 and 2023. In regards to climate, we talked about how many trees we planted, how many did we remove? How much loss of the urban tree canopy was there in the municipality? It's a huge issue at Metro. Certainly across the region, it's a huge issue, the loss of the canopy. So I think it's really important, as Mr. Miller pointed out, that we need to look at, what we didn't accomplish, or what our challenges were. When we talk about our wins, we also have to talk about our losses. The numbers of transit well ridership, it says 20%, North Shore, 29% in Surrey. What is that in numbers? I like numbers, not percentages, because percentages are often misleading. And then, you know, looking ahead, just in the back of the report, looking ahead, we should be talking about this legislation. I'll take my other 2 minutes, please. We should be looking at this legislation. We should be looking at, what's on the horizon in regards to this sewage treatment plant. Give some indication as we're looking ahead to some of the challenges we're going to face. Interest rates, what's going to happen there? I think they were talking about interest rates on the news today. Inflation rose slightly. I missed the whole report, but I caught the beginning of it. And maybe the Bank of Canada isn't going to lower interest rates. So what's that going to mean? So I know it's a large body of work. I don't know if I've ever asked this question, but I'd be interested in the process and how this information is gathered and when it's gathered. And I do think it's really important to compare year by year. I think we've had those comments over the years by different councils to be able to gauge, are we ahead of the game? Are we falling behind? And be able to have sort of a comparative. I found the library's information the most complete because they did compare, 2022 to 2023, and I was able to gauge, trying to find them right here. I was able to gauge there was more program attendance in 2023. So I just think that's sort of a sampling of some of the comments in regards to the document. And yeah, there we go. Thanks.
Good. Thank you. Councillor Forbes, I saw your hand, but it's been removed. Do you have a comment or you want me to move along? You were next.
I had just some general comments I wanted to make on it. I concur with what's been said by members of the public, and this is the same thing that that council often says to staff, is that they deal with this stuff every day and council doesn't. So we need it explained better. And I think it's the same thing going forward, that these reports are being explained to people that aren't sitting in the meetings or the workshops necessarily. And so that's why they're needing it to be more specific. And I do think that that's credible, that we need to balance. I mean, this is a financial document in essence, and a goal, what we've achieved and what we haven't achieved. I do think it's really important, though, that we think that we have to balance this a little better with the information, make it more clear, and balance it with the product that we have to put out saying, our financial state. So I think that's something that we really do have to consider, because as council members, we've said that to staff, that if we're not looking at something every day, it's really difficult to understand. So that was the one thing that I really wanted to say.
Thank you very much. Councillor Pope, your comments?
Thank you very much. And thank you to staff for putting this together. My comments are, I have a number of comments, and one of them is that council was not consulted on any of this information before this document was published, and I feel that we should be. I feel that our input, we should have some input into what goes into this document before it's finally printed and published and made public. And it's partly for the reasons that many of that the several speakers from the public have already alluded to. For example, the wastewater treatment plant bill is one of the biggest bills that the North Shore has ever faced, and it's not even mentioned. It needed to be acknowledged. It needed to be spelled out. And that's a real, I think I didn't quite understand the explanation as to why it wasn't. I think we've all pretty much said that it should have been in there. I'm disappointed to see very little mention of reconciliation. We pay a lot of lip service to building better relationships with Squamish and Tsleil-Waututh. But on page 4 of this report, we say, you know, only that our values work towards reconciliation with local First Nations. And we have always talked about building better relationships with our Indigenous friends, Squamish Nation and Tsleil-Waututh. And yet this past year, there has been, despite certain members of council, including myself and Councillor Batt, consistently asking for better relationships, this has not occurred. Goal number 2, address the housing crisis and the community's housing needs. Well, we certainly failed to deliver on providing a range of affordable and diverse housing options for residents with a range of incomes, as is the quote in this document. Significantly, there was no mention of the majority of council voting against provincial housing legislation that would have enabled single-family homes to have 4 units on them. We have failed to align with the law, and the fallout from that is unknown and may still be to come.
Okay.
I just have one more comment, and thank you very much, Mr. Cost, for your extensive work on this. It was very interesting to hear your suggestion or question as to whether the wastewater treatment plant debt could be legally imposed on the DNV, and I hope we can look into that further in the days to come. And Mr. Miller, thank you for your comments, and I want to apologize for the comments made towards you by the CAO. Mr. Miller has every right, as any member of the public does, to question any aspect of this annual report, and no one should be belittled because they have differing views.
I don't think that that was the case. I think the question was welcome. There was a response given to the question. I followed up as well, but we'll make sure that Mr. Miller's concerns are addressed appropriately. I will just say that council members' feedback on the annual report is always welcome through the process. Just check in with Mr. Daniluk. When was the draft release shared with council?
I'll defer that question.
Okay, Ms. Walker.
I believe it was vetted through senior staff and the CAO, and the letters from the mayor, the CFO and the CAO were essentially providing the overview of the previous year. There was some, we essentially, if you look at the CAO's letter, there is a reference to rising costs, and there was a statement that we were preparing for future infrastructure replacements, and I believe there's another statement in here about our annual budget process with costs for many projects coming in markedly higher than expected. So there was a lot of thought put into that report, and our apologies that we didn't specifically mention the wastewater treatment plan, but it certainly is top of mind for staff.
Okay, but when was the draft provided to council? Because I believe it was at least 2 weeks ago. But when was the draft version of the?
Yeah. Yeah. So we actually didn't circulate a draft to council in response to your question. It was circulated to senior staff that provide the data. And in the past, we haven't circulated it to council. However, through your worship, we certainly have heard the comments this evening, and staff will take them under advisement, and we will in future circulate a copy to council.
So I just want to be clear. So it was posted publicly on the district website 2 weeks ago.
That's correct.
Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
That's correct, but it wasn't specifically sent around to the council. I think in future, we should probably be talking to the council about opportunities to input more into the annual plan. I thought, Mr. Daniluk, I thought you started engaging with NVCan and with at a much earlier date than that. Is that not correct?
With respect to the annual report,
Well, the report's going into the report, yes.
it's through the annual planning cycle, we always engage with NVCan and we get questions throughout the year from time to time, but specifically related to the annual report, only recently we've had some contact through, and so.
All right, well, that's something we're gonna have to look at in the review, Mr. Stewart. I think making sure that we not just post it online, but that we give an opportunity for council to input feedback at an earlier stage would be appreciated.
Yeah, Your Worship, maybe Mr. Daniluk can comment. We can't do the annual report until we have the audited financial statements. So it creates a very, very tight timeline because there's legal obligations for when we actually can bring it to council and get it released. So I think, correct me, Mr. Daniluk, I mean, just within the last 2 months, we have the audited financial statements. So we literally have as staff a 2-month period to reconcile everything, collect all the information and get it actually produced. So I appreciate council's comments and we can certainly look for opportunities to ask for adjustments that they would like in advance of having the financial statements.
Yeah, I understand that the KPMG report, we have to wait for that portion of it, but it would seem to me that most of the rest of the content is in some form prepared before that part comes out, but and we should be seeking input from council at an earlier stage.
Generally, we have the draft version in the middle of April and confirmation from KPMG just a couple of weeks after that, but we have made it a goal to shorten the timeline for producing those statements.
Okay. Well, on your plan for the 2024 report, can we make sure that there's a council check-in with, even if it's an early draft, sometime around that point, the end of April, after you've received that first tranche of information would seem like an appropriate time to engage. But also council can, in the follow-up to this meeting, also share your additional comments about what you would like to see in next year's report. The balance we have to strike is that I believe last year we had 77 downloads of the annual report, and half of the people that downloaded it were sitting in the room at the time. And so it's a challenge because how much staff time do we want to be contributing to something that doesn't have a broad circulation in the community? For comparison, when we went through our capital plan, we had 77 people attached to the meeting. They were actually taking part in the capital plan meetings. And so we can spend more time, we can put more information into the annual report, but if the community is not interested in it, not using it, then it's probably not a great use of our resources and time. Definitely, we had 2 very thoughtful presentations tonight, but if it's not something, if it's not the form in which the community is interested in consuming the materials, I don't know how much more time we should be spending on putting additional information into it, outside of what we're obviously required to communicate under the charter. But that is a challenge to balance that. Councillor Back, I see your hand.
Thank you, Mayor Little. I'll start again, as my colleagues have, just thanking staff. I know this is an immense amount of work to put together this report, and I recognize that it's an obligation under the charter that we do it in this particular format. I also want to thank the 2 members of the public, Dr. Cost and Mr. Miller, for coming and speaking tonight. I think as you've just highlighted, Mayor Little, it's a challenge with this format. You've got an 86-page document. It's a lot of information for us to digest as councillors. So I can appreciate that for the average person, they're probably not going to take the time to go through a document like this. So I guess I would just again challenge staff to try to present this information in as many different ways as we can, but I know that under the charter we do have to present the actual annual report like this. In terms of some of the comments that have been made, I do agree that some references to the wastewater treatment plant should have been included, given this is a story that is the biggest financial story right now on the North Shore that everyone is talking about. And then I would also just say that, I always like to see some kind of KPIs. And I thought that this report was lacking in terms of how we measure our success in these different areas. And I know that it might be a challenge to kind of standardize that, but I want to be able to look through all these different sections and see, if we're talking about our performance in a certain area, how we actually compared to previous years as is in some of the sections, but not every section, and what our, ultimately what our goal is as a community to hit. So I thought there could have been a little bit more of that, like just clear measurements of how we know we're successful. But again, overall, I think it summarizes the priorities of the district. But it did lack certainly a section around our work around or lack thereof in terms of reconciliation, as Councillor Pope has highlighted. I certainly agree with that. And as well, also agree that a check-in with council with some sort of a draft version of this report would have certainly been appreciated, given that this is, we saw this with the public when it came out 2 weeks ago. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much. Councillor Pope, I see your hand.
Thank you. Yeah, just in terms of the things that have been left out of this report, again, on page 58 of goal number 2 under our progress, I'm curious why the supportive housing on East Keith Road wasn't mentioned.
It's probably because it was in 2024.
The decision was in 2024.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. I see any other comments or questions? I'm prepared to call, Councillor Forbes, yes?
Just a couple of points I'd like to raise. It would be really nice if we had a room jam, standing room only when we have these reports, but that's kind of a hope and a dream. But I wonder if we could, it won't happen tonight, but I wonder if I could put it on the table that when we have limited input coming in and we've set aside the evening for all of us to be able to come, that we could look at extending the time, because the amount of work that Mr. Cost puts in, and Mr. Miller, I'm sure too, put in to doing these presentations, when we really don't have a lineup going out the door wanting to speak, could we make some exceptions when that's the case? Maybe not the standing rule, but allow exceptions in the future. I'd just like to, maybe we could discuss that before next year.
We absolutely can. One of the challenges with not putting a limit on it is you don't know how many people are going to show up. And if you
Right.
do have a full room and someone decides to do a 45-minute presentation followed by another half-an-hour presentation, it really isn't there to serve the purpose of reviewing the 2023 annual report at that point. And so, we put the time limit in place so people focus on the most important priorities of what they want to discuss. They can also provide all of their additional comments and ideas and questions in advance through many other means as well.
I understand all that, but I'm saying if we had the standing rule and you only get the 2 5-minute slots, but are we at least open to, if we are not having a room full of speakers, that maybe we could adjust accordingly in the future? I'm just asking. We'll put that on the table for discussion.
Thank you.
The one other thing is, I know in the past I'm not crazy about surveys personally, because I think you get the opinions of the people who are paying attention and care, and you don't necessarily get the overall opinion. But in the past, I think we used to have some sort of surveys where how well the public thought we were doing in getting to our goals. Is there any way that we can put something like that in this, like put a survey out and put that in here, and then that's really going to show us, we may think we're coming across a certain way, but maybe we aren't.
Okay. Mr. Stewart?
I agree with you completely. And we had attempted to try to do that last year, but because of workload, we just couldn't. But I would like to have that as part of our annual cycle, even if it's a shorter survey. And then we can do a more in-depth one, which we used to do every 3 years. So I'm very, very supportive of that. I think council needs to understand that, because otherwise what you do is you get anecdotal information from somebody that you talk to on the street, and it doesn't necessarily represent the general public. So I'm very supportive of that.
That's great. Thank you. That's all.
Yeah, and one of the other challenges we found this year with versus previous years, that we used to do lots of 5-year benchmarking. And when you look out over the last 5 years, you got 2 years of COVID, 2 years of recovery from COVID, and all of those 5-year benchmarks are all over the map. And so it's been hard to show how things are changing, shifting, because you have these anomalies that affected every aspect of our life for a period of time. So, but your point's well made. Thank you, Councillor Forbes. Okay, anyone else? We're done with the public input portion. We're going to vote, and then we're going to be done, and then we can chat after the fact. So I'm going to call a question on receipt of the motion. All in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries. That completes the business of this evening's meeting. Thank you all so much for preparing the reports for our consideration. I know it's a lot of work preparing the annual report, but we do appreciate your efforts. Thank you to members of the public for your presentations. I wish everybody a great week and good evening. Good night.